February 26, 1962. Café Gambrinus, Naples, Italy. Lucky Luciano sat at his usual outdoor table, drinking espresso and reading the New York Times. He was 64 years old, had been in exile for 16 years, would never see America again, but as he read about a mob war brewing in New York, a dispute between the Genovese and Gambino families, Lucky knew exactly what would happen next. His phone would ring. Frank Costello would call from New York, and Lucky would make a decision that would end the dispute within 48 hours, because even from Italy, 4,000 miles from New York, Lucky Luciano still ran the American Mafia. This is the story of the most powerful exile in criminal history. When the US government deported Lucky Luciano in 1946, they thought they were removing a problem. Lucky had helped the war effort, used his connections to secure the New York waterfront against Nazi sabotage. In exchange, his sentence was commuted. But there was a condition: immediate deportation to Italy. Permanent exile, never allowed to return to American soil. The government thought this would end Lucky's influence, that without being physically present in New York, he couldn't control the commission, couldn't run the families, couldn't maintain power. They were spectacularly wrong. February 9, 1946. Lucky boarded the SS Laura Keene, destination Naples, Italy. He arrived with $10,000 in cash, a few suits, and a small black book containing every phone number he'd ever need. Frank Costello in New York, Meyer Lansky in Miami, Santo Trafficante in Tampa, Sam Giancana in Chicago, Mickey Cohen in Los Angeles, every major mob boss in America, every connection that mattered, all in that little black book. Lucky's first action in Italy was to set up a communication system. He rented a small office in downtown Naples, installed a dedicated international phone line. Expensive in 1946, but essential. Then he established a protocol. Every Tuesday and Friday, Frank Costello would call from New York, report on commission business, disputes between families, major decisions that needed Lucky's input. Lucky would listen, ask questions, give orders, and Frank would implement them. It was that simple, and that effective. By 1947, it was clear that deportation hadn't diminished Lucky's power. If anything, it had enhanced it, because now he was unreachable. The FBI couldn't surveil him, the NYPD couldn't arrest him, rival mobsters couldn't kill him. He was safe in Italy, but his reach extended across the Atlantic. Here's how Lucky maintained control from exile. The phone system every Tuesday and Friday, 3 p.m. New York time, 9 p.m. in Naples. Frank Costello called Lucky's private line. These calls lasted 30-40. Frank would update Lucky on everything: family disputes, business opportunities, threats from rivals, police investigations. Lucky would ask detailed questions. What did Gambino say? How did Genovese react? What's Anastasia's position? Then Lucky would make decisions. Tell Gambino to back down. Have Genovese apologize. Get Anastasia in line. And because it was Lucky Luciano giving the orders, the man who'd created the commission, who'd killed Joe Masseria and Salvatore Maranzano, who'd earned respect through decades of strategic brilliance, everyone listened. The messenger system. For matters too sensitive for phone calls, Lucky used messengers, trusted men who'd fly from Italy to New York carrying verbal messages. No paper trail, no recordings, just word-of-mouth instructions. Meyer Lansky visited Lucky in Italy twice a year, would spend a week in Naples, discussing long-term strategy, heroin importation, casino operations in Cuba, political corruption. These weren't social visits. They were board meetings, executive planning sessions for the largest criminal organization in the world. The money system. Lucky needed income. His accounts in America had been seized, but he still had connection. Through Lansky, Lucky became a silent partner in Havana casinos. Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista, allowed the mob to run gambling operations. Lucky got 5% of all casino profits, millions of dollars a year. That money was laundered through Italian businesses, olive oil import-export, restaurants in Naples, consulting fees. Lucky lived comfortably, not as rich as he'd been in New York, but wealthy enough to maintain his lifestyle and his influence. The respect system, this was the most important. Lucky's power wasn't based on money or fear. It was based on respect. When the commission faced a deadlock, when families couldn't agree on a decision, they called Lucky, and Lucky's word was final. Not because he could hurt them from Italy, but because everyone remembered. Lucky had built this system, had created the peace, had made everyone rich. You don't disrespect the founder. You don't ignore the architect. Let me tell you about one specific case that shows Lucky's power from Exile, the Genovese-Anastasia dispute of 1957. Vito Genovese wanted to kill Albert Anastasia. Anastasia ran Murder Inc., the enforcement arm of the mob. He was violent, unpredictable, dangerous. Genovese thought Anastasia was too reckless, too likely to bring heat from law enforcement. He wanted permission from the commission to eliminate him. The commission was split. Some agreed with Genovese. Others thought killing Anastasia would start a war. They called Lucky in Naples. Frank Costello made the call. October 23, 1957. Charlie, we have a situation. Genovese wants Anastasia dead. Half the commission agrees. Half doesn't. We need your decision. Lucky listened to all the arguments. Then asked one question. Does Anastasia know? No. He has no idea this is being discussed. Lucky was quiet for a moment. Then tell Genovese he can move forward. But make it clean. Make it look like a barbershop accident. And make sure there's no war after. Genovese has to personally guarantee peace with the Gambino family. 2 days later, October 25, 1957, Albert Anastasia was shot dead in a barbershop at the Park Sheraton Hotel. 5 bullets while he was getting a shave. The hit was clean, professional, and afterward, Genovese met with the Gambino family. Guaranteed peace. Just like Lucky ordered. A man was killed in New York based on a phone call from Italy. That's power. But Lucky's control from Exile wasn't unlimited. There were constraints. He couldn't be physically present. When the commission met in person, Lucky couldn't attend. That gave other bosses more autonomy than they'd had when Lucky was in New York. He couldn't control daily operations. Street-level business, gambling, loan sharking, hijacking, happened without Lucky's input. He only got involved in major decisions. He couldn't prevent betrayal. In 1957, Vito Genovese tried to take over the commission, wanted to be the new boss of bosses. Lucky's influence prevented it, but he couldn't stop Genovese from trying. He couldn't return to America. This was the biggest limitation. No matter how powerful Lucky was, he couldn't set foot in the United States. And that distance, over time, did erode some of his authority. By 1960, Lucky was still respected, still consulted, but younger bosses, men like Carlo Gambino, who'd come up after Lucky left, felt less obligated to defer to him. The world was changing, and Lucky, from his exile in Naples, could feel it. February 1962, Lucky Luciano's final weeks. Lucky was 64. He'd been in Italy for 16 years. His health was declining. Heart problems, diabetes, the toll of a life lived hard. But he still maintained his routines. Coffee at Café Gambrinus every morning. Phone calls with Frank Costello every Tuesday and Friday. Meetings with Italian associates. Plans for the future. On February 26, 1962, Lucky went to Naples airport. He was meeting a Hollywood producer who wanted to make a movie about his life. Lucky thought it was a bad idea, but agreed to the meeting anyway. At the airport, Lucky had a heart attack. Massive. Sudden, he collapsed in the terminal. He died before the ambulance arrived. 64 years old, in an airport in Italy, waiting to meet someone about a movie that would never be made. His death made headlines worldwide. Lucky Luciano, mafia boss, dead at 64. The US government, which had exiled him 16 years earlier, initially refused to allow his body to be returned to America, but after lobbying from Italian officials and some well-placed bribes, they relented. Lucky's body was flown to New York, buried in St. John's Cemetery in Queens. Thousands came to the funeral, mobsters, politicians, celebrities, paying respects to the man who'd changed organized crime forever. At the funeral, Frank Costello gave a brief eulogy. Charlie built something that lasted. He created order from chaos, peace from war, and even from exile. He kept that system running. That's his legacy. After Lucky's death, the commission continued. His structure remained. The 5 families still operated. The system he'd created lived on, but something was lost. Without Lucky's unifying presence, disputes became more heated. Wars broke out. The 1960s and 70s saw more mob violence than the previous 30 years combined. Because Lucky had been the glue, the wise voice, the man everyone respected enough to listen to. From exile in Italy, Lucky had held it all together, and when he died, that cohesion died with him. Today, organized crime historians still debate, could anyone else have maintained power from exile the way Lucky did? The consensus, probably not, because Lucky's authority wasn't based on fear or money. It was based on something deeper, the respect earned through decades of strategic brilliance. He'd killed the right people at the right time. He'd created a system that made everyone rich. He'd brought peace to an industry built on violence. And when the government exiled him, thinking they'd ended his reign, Lucky proved them wrong. From a café in Naples, with nothing but a phone line and a black book full of numbers, he continued to run the most powerful criminal organization in America. One phone call from Italy could end your life in New York. That was Lucky Luciano's exile. Not a punishment, a relocation of his office. The government thought they'd removed him from the game, but Lucky just changed the rules, proved that true power doesn't require physical presence. It requires respect, intelligence, and the foresight to build systems that work even when you're not there. 16 years in exile, but never truly exiled from power. That's the genius of Lucky Luciano. That's why, 60 years after his death, we're still talking about him, still learning from him, still marveling at how a man banned from his own empire continued to rule it from across the ocean. The Café Gambrinus in Naples still exists today. Lucky's usual table, the one by the window where he'd drink espresso and read the New York Times, is marked with a small plaque. Here sat Charles Lucky Luciano, 1946-1960. If this story about the most powerful exile in history inspired you, hit that subscribe button. Drop a like if you believe true power transcends physical borders. Comment below, could modern technology make ruling from exile even easier today? Remember, Lucky Luciano proved that empires aren't built on presence, they're built on respect, and respect can reach across any distance.